Mike Devers, in his book, said that I had a short attention span. Well, I was going to reply to that, but what the hell, let's move on to something else.
I remember the story of the fella here a while ago who was running for Congress as a Republican. He stopped by a farm to do some campaigning, and when the farmer heard he was a Republican, his jaw dropped and he said, "Wait right here." He said, "While I get Ma. She's never seen a Republican before." So he got Ma, and the candidate looked around for a podium to give his speech from. The only thing he could find was a pile of that stuff that Bess Truman took 35 years trying to get Harry to call fertilizer. So he got up on the mound, and when they came back, he gave his speech. End of it, the farmer says, "That's the first time I've ever heard a Republican speech." The candidate said, "That's the first time I've ever given a Republican speech from a Democratic platform."
Down in Texas during the 1976 primary, they had me out knocking on doors. And I remember one kind of rural area. I'd been governor of California, but I wasn't all that well known in Texas, and I knocked on the door, and an old fellow in his undershirt and jeans came to the door, and I told him I was running for president, and having been in the occupation I'd been in for a number of years, I was kind of surprised when he asked me what I'd done for a living. And I told him I'd been an actor, and then he asked me what my name was. And I thought, well, maybe if I give him a hint. And so I said, well, my initials were RR. And with that, a face lit up, and he turned and he ran back into the house, and he was yelling, "Ma, Ma, come on out here quick. Roy Rogers is outside." The fellow fell off a cliff, and as he was falling, grabbed a limb sticking out the side of the cliff and looked down 300 feet to the canyon floor below, and then looked up and said, "Lord, if there's anyone up there, give me faith. Tell me what to do." And a voice from the heavens said, "If you have faith, let go." He looked down at the canyon floor and then took another look up and says, "Is there anyone else up there?" Arthur C. Clarke, distinguished author of science and fiction, says ideas often have three stages of reaction. First, it's crazy. Don't waste my time. Second, it's possible, but it's not worth doing. And finally, I've always said it was a good idea. Now this one, it's titled The Great Communicator, but as you can see, there's been some mistake there. They left the balloon blank, so I think that filling it in. I forgot what I was going to say. Have you ever noticed you're in a profession where when you're introduced sometimes at a social gathering to someone you've never met before, and the first thing you know, when they hear that word doctor, they start right out by saying, "Well, doctor, I've been having a," and they go on with that. Well, we had a fellow in the business I used to be in show business, Moss Hart, the playwright, and he was an inveterate along that line. Anytime he was introduced to a doctor, he had a complaint. And one night at a party in Hollywood, he was introduced to a Dr. Jones and immediately started talking about this low back pain that he was having. And the fellow that introduced him was embarrassed, and he said, "Moss, Dr. Jones is a doctor of economics." That didn't stop Moss. He turned right back to the doctor and said, "I bought some stock last week." Under our system, it's not the federal government that runs the schools, but the men and women who come out of our local schools, they run the government. When I read the writings of our founding fathers who designed our system, I always note how openly they gave praise to God and sought His guidance. And I just can't believe that it was ever their intention to expel him from our schools. I must say before I go on, someone has once said that actually as long as there are final exams, there will be prayer in schools. It's about a newspaper photographer out in Los Angeles
Kind of reminds me of Howard. He was called in by his editor and told of a fire that was raging in Palos Verdes. That's a hilly area in the southern part of Los Angeles County. And the photographer's assignment was to rush down to a small local airport, board a waiting plane, go out and get some pictures of the fire and be back in time for the afternoon edition. Well, he raced down the freeway, broke all the traffic laws, got to the airport, drove his car to the end of the runway, and sure enough, there was a plane revving up its engines, ready to go. He jumped in the plane shouting, "Let's go," and they were off. At about 5,000 feet, he began getting his camera out of the bag, told the fellow flying the plane to get him over the fire so he could get his pictures and get back to the paper. And from the other side of the cockpit, there was a deafening silence. And then he heard those words he will always remember. "Aren't you the instructor?" And this is one that I told to Gorbachov. It seems that they recently issued an order that anyone that's caught speeding must get a ticket. And you know that the most of the driving there is done by the Politburo, by the bureaucracy. They're the ones with cars and drivers and so forth. So it seems that one morning Gorbachov himself came out of his country home, knew he was late getting to the Kremlin, told his driver to get in the back seat and he'd drive. And down the road he went, past two motorcycle policemen. One of them took out after him. A few minutes he's back with his buddy. And the buddy says, "Did you give him a ticket?" He said, "No." Well, he said, "Why not? We were told that anyone caught speeding was to get a ticket." He says, No, this one was too important." Well, he said, "Who was it?" He says, "I don't know. I couldn't recognize him, but his driver was Gorbachov."